Welcome to a special bonus episode of the Connexus Church podcast. My name is Carey, and we just finished a series recently called To Be List, and I'll tell you, it had a huge impact. We just heard from so many of you, and I got to be honest with you, sometimes, as somebody who's created probably hundreds of series at this point in my life, you kind of have an idea of how they're going to land, and then there's how they actually land, and this was a memorable one because in my head, it was pretty uplifting sermon series. And I think the reality is it hit a lot of people really hard. And that was good. Like, it was a good hard. When I was talking to you, reading your emails, your notes, your comments on social, it was a good hard because it's all about the gap between who we are and perhaps who we want to be or who God wants us to be. And I think that's something that if you were there in person on the final week, there was a powerful moment. We had our prayer teams come forward at our locations. We had many, many people prayed for. It was incredible. So very, very thankful for that. But I wanted to bring you a bonus episode. And this is a conversation that I do for my leadership podcast. It's just called the Carey Leadership Podcast. And I've known Joel Manby for a number of years through mutual friends. He was the youngest CEO ever in GM history, being the CEO of Saab. He was on the Saturn design team. He was CEO of Herschend Entertainment. And then a little more recently, CEO of SeaWorld. If you ever saw the documentary Blackfish, it ran on CNN and Netflix forever. Anyway, he joined SeaWorld shortly after that. And Joel and I have an honest conversation about the personal cost of high-capacity leadership. Joel's exceptionally vulnerable in this interview. He talks about, actually, though, despite being a committed Christian, how his marriage didn't make it through his time at SeaWorld, how it was just so much pressure, and how he tried to live out his faith in the midst of it all. I went to Joel's home in Atlanta to do this interview. It's a very powerful conversation. And I asked Joel, after we finished it, and while I was teaching through the series, I just texted him and I said, hey, would you mind if we shared this with our church family at Connexus? And he said, absolutely. So, leadership is hard. Life is hard sometimes, and it has unintended consequences. But Joel is really committed in this next season of his life to really making sure that some of the things he's learned along the way are going to inform his future. That's what I want in my life. That's what he wants in his, and I'm sure that's what you want in yours. So a very honest conversation, a very real conversation, and Joel and I hope it helps you. And Joel, thank you again for sharing this. But here's my conversation with former SeaWorld CEO, Joel Manby. Well, Joel, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Carey. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited. At your house.
Yes.
In Alpharetta.
Alpharetta.
Uh-huh. Not a whole lot. I mean, we're pushing 300 episodes by the time this airs.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
That is fantastic.
Not a lot of people have your CV. They really don't, your resume.
Yep.
You've served in 4 major corporations and helped others, including a not-for-profit, one of my favorites that we'll talk about.
Yes.
Can you give us a quick history?
Yeah, I would love to give you a quick history. If you don't mind, I'm going to include a little of my personal story too, not just my professional
you're Harvard
story.
MBA too.
Well, that's some people shouldn't know that. It's not always helpful. But, I think one thing that's really relevant is I grew up very modestly and very poor in a small town called Battle Creek, Michigan. My dad was a failed entrepreneur, factory worker, and I want people to hear that because there's a lot of young leaders listening to this, and sometimes they think they have to have special advantage or special opportunities. Really, everything that came my way, I either worked for or people, just pointed me in the right direction. It was really helpful. I was able, as you said, went to Albion College and then to Harvard, but I have to say I had no clue that I wanted to be in business at first. In fact, I wanted to be a baseball player all through college, and it wasn't. I got invited to a Detroit Tiger tryout camp.
No way.
Yeah, we had pretty good.
I grew up watching the Tigers. I was born in Windsor.
Actually, Cincinnati Reds too. But the funny thing is, and I was a senior in college, and it wasn't until I went to that tryout camp and went up against the 90-mile-an-hour pitchers, and I never even fouled off a pitch. I mean, I just was like a ceiling fan swinging at pitches, and that was the first time where I said, "Hey, I got to get serious about academics and really, really go there." I was going to be a lawyer at first, but I got the best advice ever from a lawyer who I worked for an internship. And at the end of the internship, I said, do you think I should be a lawyer? And he said, no, right out of the, which really surprised me. And as he said, look, and you're a football player. Lawyers tend to be the referees. You're like a quarterback. You want to run things. You're a born leader. You should go into business. And it was the best advice I ever got. And so that's why I went on to Harvard. But for the listeners, it wasn't like I had this proactive strategy at 16 or 18 or 22 to go into business and be a CEO. And a lot of CEOs will say that. I never sought out that job. I never sought out to be at that level. I just did the best I could at every level. So the reason I went to General Motors, actually I was a deferred admit out of Albion, so I had 2 years before Harvard. General Motors was the only company that would pay for someone to go back and get their MBA. And since I was so poor, there was no way I was going to be able to afford.
So poor.
tuition.
I mean, I've heard you tell a story that you wanted to go for ice cream after winning a... Do you want to tell that story?
Well, yeah, because my dad worked really hard, and my dad loved me, and I know he did, but he had a failing auto dealership, a tractor dealership, and they were running out of money, it turns out now. My mom told me after he died that he was bringing home about $50 a week. So,
and this is in the 60s.
Yeah, even in the 60s, that's only $2,500 a year, so that's not much. And I hit the game-winning home run, whatever, and we were all going to go to A&W, and that ages me right there. And my dad wouldn't take me, and the whole team went, and I started crying on the way home. I was crying in bed. My mom came in and I said, why doesn't Dad love me? How can he not take me to the A&W? And she said, we don't have any cash, and he's trying to make payroll on Friday, and so there were many stories like that we could go to, but I definitely had kind of a fear, almost a fear of failure, or a fear that I wouldn't have enough because my parents didn't have enough, at least in my mind. Now, the truth is, we never missed a meal. Yeah. I had love, but I will tell you that definitely influenced kind of my trajectory.
How so?
I'm not sure I would have chosen business if I was just focused on where my heart was, honestly. I mean, if you look at my profile, it said I should have been a coach or a pastor. I have a very, meaning my heart was really strong for other people. I wanted to, and it wasn't so much about just the bottom line. And yet I was afraid of not making enough money. And I hate to admit that, because I know that's not of God. That's not what Christ speaks about. It has been an Achilles heel of I wasn't trusting God enough to do what I felt maybe was in my heart. Now, I will tell you, I ended up loving my business career, but it wasn't until later, and we'll get to that. I know we talk about the Hershon experience. The first 20 years of my career, about 15, with General Motors were very, very difficult, because I kept thinking there must be a better way to lead, a more caring way, a more loving way, and still get great financial results.
Right.
But it took me a long time to get there. So, kind of finishing up the
Just give us the bird's eye view, because we're going to drill down. It's pretty remarkable, especially given your background.
It was I went to Harvard, and then we helped start Saturn Corporation. There was only 4 of us on the marketing team, and Saturn at the time was a really big bet with General Motors that we can go into if you
care. We will. You can still see a few on the road today.
Yeah, and
right?
It was incredibly strong launch and really successful for about 10 years before the broader GM bankruptcy affected it. But because of the success of Saturn, I actually went on to Saab and was CEO of Saab North America at a very young age, at 35. And it was really because of the success of Saturn. They wanted a Saturn person to run Saab, because Saturn had a so-so car with phenomenal marketing and phenomenal distribution. Saab had an amazing car with really mediocre distribution and really mediocre.
And GM
safety.
Bought the Swedish company,
yes,
right?
They bought Saab, and then I went there and stayed, and we had a really good set of years.
So you're CEO at 35.
Yeah, 35 of a major division of General Motors. And long story short, as most corporate promotions go, and a lot of listeners know this, you get a promotion and they added South America and Asia, 5% raise, and now I'm on the road 80% of the time.
Right.
And I had 3 young kids. My wonderful wife, Marky, was saying, hey, I can't do this. And so I asked to just take America back and let go of Asia, because those were like month at a time trips.
Yeah.
And my boss said no. And in hindsight, I think I probably should have gone back and said, I'm leaving if you don't do what I'm asking, because I can't do this anymore. At the same time he said no, a search firm called, and that I went to a .com startup that was actually Amazon's car tab. So in 1999, you could buy a car on Amazon, and Bezos was on our board. I mean, it was a phenomenal experience, which we can talk about if you want.
But yeah, we will. Well, it was called Greenlight, right?
Greenlight.com.
Yeah.
It crashed and burned in the .com implosion. Well, we sold it, but we had to sell it basically.
Minutes later, implosion. Yeah.
And then I was already on the board of Hershey Entertainment when I was at Saab, was able to transition to the theme park business. And I spent 13 wonderful years there, which I'd love to talk about. And that's where I really learned a loving work environment that still is very accountable, could create great profitability. Then I was asked to go to SeaWorld about 4 years ago now. Stayed there almost 3, resigned, which is a interesting story. And then now really spend my time as non-executive chair of Orange, which you're very involved in. And
we're spending tomorrow in meetings.
Yes, we are.
With Rethink with Orange.
Really, you've done so much for that organization. And so that's long and short of the career side.
Yeah, and that's quite something. I mean, and you went to SeaWorld, just to put this in context, right after Blackfish was released, and the air was coming out of the balloon quickly.
Yes.
And I think their previous CEO, was he fired or did he resign?
He was let go.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to go into that whole situation.
Yeah, just give us the broad context, because that's leadership under fire. My
basically,
goodness.
The Blackfish, for those who don't know about it, was a shockumentary that made SeaWorld look very, very bad. And I loved SeaWorld, and I still hated them when I saw the documentary. It was so well done, and it basically attributed the trainer's death to whales who are going crazy because they're in captivity. Right. And that's not true, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Sales at the SeaWorld facilities dropped in half.
So this is right next to Disney, right?
Yeah, profitability dropped in half. And this is the big statistic. The trustworthiness of SeaWorld, 40% of the country had seen Blackfish. Can you imagine? 40%. Because it was run every week on CNN, who purports itself to be a news agency.
Right. But it debuted at the Sundance Film Festival.
Yes, it did.
Right?
It did.
And then it got picked up.
CNN bought it. And so what happened is our trustworthiness with the American public went from 65% top box score, best ever, down to 35% in a year and a half.
Wow.
And so the CEO was let go. He's a wonderful person. I actually, there's another side of that story. I probably shouldn't go down that path, but I don't know that the board either really realized the extent of the damage of Blackfish. So I was recruited in, and my job was to reposition the brand, which I feel like we did incredibly well. It's known as a animal entertainment brand, right? Shamu. And it was one of the biggest business paradoxes I've ever seen, when the very thing that puts you at the top and your brand was known for, Shamu, was also the biggest liability now.
Wow. Yeah.
And people weren't coming anymore because of that. We did some incredible work, and I'm very proud of a lot of things that we accomplished there. But in the end of the day, the trustworthiness came back. We ended orca breeding. We repositioned the company as basically a purpose-driven brand that we call Park to Planet. And the numbers were coming back. Unfortunately, we had a bad 17. 90% of it could be attributed directly to hurricanes, but I needed 17 personally to go up, and it went down. And I think the board made a decision, we're probably going to have to make a change. Yet, on my last day of work, we were up 12%. California was up 50%. So I think if I had been given a little bit more time, I think the numbers came back very quickly. And in a 3-year cycle business, anyone who runs a company with a 3-year cycle, meaning it takes 3 years to develop a theme park product, a ride, an attraction.
Yeah.
I feel good about what I did there, but there's a lot more we could go into.
Well, and we will, but I think that's like over 2.5 decades of leadership at the senior level. And I think there's a lot of resonance. I think sometimes if you're in ministry, which some of us are, you look at corporate and think, well, wouldn't that be easy? Right.
Well, I never look at ministry and think, wouldn't that be easy? I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, and you're heavily involved and have been for years at North Point Church and have been an elder at North Point and good friends with Andy and with Reggie Stanley. Reggie Joyner.
Yes.
Yeah, this is evening podcast interviews. So really my specialty, Joel. So
thanks for enduring.
Yeah, no worries. It was some work setting this up. But anyway, in corporate too, we always hear about the great stories and then the crash stories, but there's a lot of struggle in the middle.
Oh my gosh.
And we're going to get into that. I want to go back. American auto industry, massive changes, obviously, that most of us have witnessed in our lifetime, even over the last decade, right? If you look at the Great Recession, that gutted the auto industry.
Yeah.
And you weren't at GM or Saab or Saturn at that time. But just leadership-wise, what were some of the challenges? And let's go back to Saturn, because I didn't realize the team was that small, 4 people.
Well, the marketing team was.
Marketing team was 4 people, yeah. And so this goes back to, was that the 80s that Saturn
debuted? It was
debuted?
the 80s.
Really? See, I remember the 80s. A lot of our listeners were born in the 80s or 90s or 2000s. But there was already...
They can still learn from it.
They can still learn from it. So, I mean, to go way back, I remember when the Japanese, I don't remember this, but I remember reading about this. When the Japanese first came over, the products were terrible. And the American, and my dad was involved in the auto industry. He's a tool and mold maker. So he did a lot of lenses for car parts and that kind of thing, taillights. So I always felt like I kind of knew a little bit more about the auto industry than I should have. But, the Japanese were almost laughed out of the market, and then the products got good.
Right.
It's kind of like what happened with Hyundai or Kia, and all of a sudden they got good. And so there was arrogance, hubris in the auto industry, particularly in Detroit, where the big 3 said, we rule the world. And next thing you knew, people are buying smaller cars. There's the environmental crisis, fuel crisis, oil prices, and these small Japanese and foreign cars all of a sudden start to sell.
Yep.
So GM comes along and says, we need to do this differently.
Yep.
And that's where they tapped you?
Well, they tapped us for Saturn. Yeah, I was part of it. You're exactly right. What basically happened is no one was making money on the small car in the U.S. Manufacturing market. So they just gave it up to the Japanese thinking, no one makes any money on it. It's not a big market. Well, then the gas crisis hit and small cars became a huge market. GM, Ford were way behind. So Saturn was intended to be a quality breakthrough for small cars for the U.S. manufacturers, especially General Motors, to be price competitive, quality competitive, and it was also meant to be a new labor contract agreement between the union and the management. Because you're right, there was hubris, there was also a lack of trust between the dealers and the executives, between the union and the executives. Looking back in hindsight, Saturn did. They were great at 2 things, but not what was intended to happen. They were the manufacturing prowess, getting a better product out there really didn't happen. It was pretty average product, but it scored so well because of the guest experience and the marketing and how it was positioned with the consumer. But this is an interesting story I'll tell because I think it's a good lesson for any leader. Some of the best ideas, best innovation comes through necessity. It's not just Steve Jobs thinking, hey, I'm going to do iTunes or make an iPod. That's so breakthrough. In the Saturn case, I'll never forget this. I was 25, right out of business school. We were in a marketing meeting, figure out how we're going to market this car. And marketing wasn't a big part of the idea. Again, it's just going to be a better car and it's going to be a better contract. Well, we drove what's called the mule car, which is what the engine and transmission is, and you get to feel what the car is really going to feel like and look like. And it was not good. It was leaking oil. It was noisy. And we literally came back into the conference room at like 9 at night, and we were all just bringing in hot dogs and pizzas and said, we're going to be here for the next week trying to figure out what we're going to do because we're going to get killed. The Japanese will kill us. In a nutshell, that's out of that meeting and those series of meetings. And someone recommended, let's base it on the car experience. Forget the buying experience, not the car itself, but the buying experience. And every car up until then, every ad was, a car spinning around on wet pavement. That was the car ad of the 1980s. We were the first company to say, we're going to make car buying fun, trustworthy, and it should be one of the greatest experiences of your life, and we're going to make it that way. And that was the impetus for what made Saturn so great. And so I think what I walk away from that experience was, I think the car industry is one of the most competitive, big, tough industries in the world.
Yeah.
Overcrowded with manufacturers from all over the world, and yet we still were able to carve out a niche. So any leader listening, I don't care what organization or business you're in, you can carve out a niche if you listen to the customer and find that niche. And that's the customers hated car buying, and that's the biggest thing I learned from Saturn.
Wow. What did you change about the customer experience?
We just basically made it no hassle. It was the biggest thing. So
was it I'm trying to remember. And
it was no haggle, no hassle was what it was called. Now, people misunderstand that. They thought it always had to be sticker price. It didn't, because the market dictates that, right? How hot's the car? And so whatever the dealer put on the car that day, we call them retailers, not dealers, that was what you were going to pay. And when you came in with a trade-in, you were given one offer, and that's what they were going to give you. And your interest rate was based on a pre-established, rate, and there was nothing hidden. Whereas the car buying experience is the worst retail experience, I think, on earth, other than perhaps buying timeshare, down in Florida. And so we were just trying to make it honest, like you would want to be treated, and like you'd want your mom to be treated. And it really resonated with the consumers.
That's good.
So that was the big thing about what Saturn was trying to do for the industry.
So successful experience, successful marketing, not so much a successful product.
Right. I mean, it did its job, but it wasn't known for being an amazing product. And then moving to Saab, like I said to you, it was because of what I was part of the Saturn team. That was a big break for me, getting that kind of role at that young of an age.
35 to be a CEO. And what were your peers? Were they all like the other CEOs of the other divisions, Buick?
Yeah, they were all 50s or 60s, kind of my age now. And all the people who worked for me were a lot older than me. So
how do you handle that? I get that question a lot from young leaders who are taking over and they have an older staff.
Just first of all, realize the situation, be humble, don't have all the answers, and listen to them. Ask questions because they know a lot. And I ask a zillion questions. I'm probably one of my greatest skill sets is asking questions and then shutting up and listening. And I spend a lot more time, I think, listening than I do talking. And that's the biggest thing. And that's the biggest advice I could give on that.
Wow.
And then...
So you're 30. No, thank you for that. So listen, show humility, and don't pretend you're 50 and have 30 years of experience.
And you don't have to tell them something or show them how smart you are. That's actually the last thing they want to see. I mean, you talked about the Harvard MBA. I ditched that diploma. I don't even know where it is.
Mine are in a drawer.
Yeah. They even teach you that at Harvard. Don't put your resume or your diploma on the wall. It isn't going to help. And it doesn't. It's better they, whatever. So the other thing about Saab that I would love to share for any listener, the thing I felt probably the best about there is we as a team didn't use conventional approaches. And I think every leadership situation I've gone into, there's no playbook. I'm very leery of people say, well, I have a framework or a model that works every situation I go into, because every one of them is different. And models mean you kind of look at things the same way. Now, it's fine to have them to start, but very quickly you have to see and listen and say, this is the issue, this is the issue. And if I went through each of my 4 CEO experiences, what I was trying to accomplish was very different in each one. They're very, very different answers. And at Saab, it was a completely muddled brand, and the dealership network was horrible.
Yeah.
And everyone was dueled with like Nissan or Infiniti. Whereas all the other luxury import brands had exclusive facilities, exclusive people. So long story short, we completely restructured the network, and we're counterintuitive and actually took a third of the dealers out of the network, fired a third of them basically, required the remaining 65% to do exclusive buildings and people. And what ended up happening is we brought in a good car as well called the 9.5, and the overall network went up 67%, but since there was a third of fewer of them, we doubled the sales per store, which created great profitability for them. And then they added exclusive dealerships, exclusive people, and it was a really successful experiment. But the executives at General Motors, the sales executives, their mantra was, if you need more units, you add more dealers.
Right.
Well, if they're dueled, it doesn't really bring you much. So that was my point to the listeners is, don't necessarily listen, use your instincts, make sure you see the problem, and everyone's different.
So that's a good point. I mean, you're the CEO of Saab, but you're not the chairman or the CEO of General Motors.
No.
So you've got superiors, you've got bosses, you've got a board.
Definitely.
And you've got a different philosophy than Detroit. How did you handle that?
That's a great question. You always have to find one advocate. And I found one advocate on the board, the Saab board, a guy named Don Hudler, God bless his soul. He was my biggest fan. He was actually the one that recommended me to be CEO of Saab, and he believed in that strategy because that's kind of how Saturn did it. And he argued on my behalf as a board member with the other board members who they just didn't know any better. So you do have to have an advocate usually on the board, because if they're all against you or they all have different ideas, it's quite different.
So a lot of our leaders, whether it's the not-for-profit world, church world, or business world, have boards. Isn't that politics? Like how do you do that in a way that...
It's completely politics.
Okay, so let's go there. What do you mean?
So, look, I think every senior pastor, every senior leader has to deal with a board, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
And especially if the board members aren't senior in their mindset, not necessarily in their age, or if they're trying to prove something. The best board members I have found have been CEOs or leaders, senior pastors, having the number one role or having enough experience that they're not trying to prove something by their knowledge on the board. And when you get board members who are trying to impress other board members with their knowledge, it's trouble quickly. And my advice I would give to anybody, because if we get to it, my biggest mistake at SeaWorld, all my S's. At SeaWorld was I didn't move fast enough to coalesce a board that was supportive of my strategy. And they were 100% turnover on that board, 2 chairmen. They all had different ideas, didn't have a strong chairman, the second one that could help me coalesce the board. I had a lot more, I think, influence than I thought. So I would encourage any pastor leaders, for-profit leaders, you have more, I hate to use the word power because I hate that word, but you have more authority and more backing than one might think. Since the SeaWorld numbers weren't great, I probably wasn't strong enough to say, I need a better board. I need a board that's will coalesce and not be it was very tough to keep the puppies in the box. But it is political. And that's probably another mistake I made is I was trying to focus so much on the business. I didn't focus enough on board relationships. I just assumed that that I needed to just turn the numbers, and there's only so many hours a day. So that's
that's really helpful. So if I can drill down on that a little bit more, Joel, whether you're thinking at SeaWorld, and you're not the only CEO. I've talked to other CEOs of literally billion-dollar companies plus who said, my fatal error was the board ousted me or, squeezed me out, or
Right.
I left because it just got untenable. And they said, I didn't pay enough attention to the board.
Right.
Now, these are people who lead major organizations. I talk to pastors and not-for-profits. They're like, yeah, the board and I are at odds. We're in trouble. I think this is
Yeah, it's true. I don't care what the number of zeros are at the end of the revenue. Every number one leader of any organization, for profit or profit, I would say it's going to be on their top 5 list of frustrations. It's very rare to have. At Hirsch Entertainment, I had a phenomenal world-class board. That's the best board I've ever served on, and I've been on, 12 or 14 different for-profit, nonprofit boards roughly. So I've seen enough that I think I know, and it's rare to find something that healthy. But
So let's talk about what a healthy relationship is, because you had your friend Don back at Saab.
Yep.
I'm running everything you're saying through my filter of working with a board for over 20 years in leadership.
Yep.
And I think the classic tension whenever this gets discussed is, on the one hand, you have a board who has to hold you accountable, which kind of
Right.
is their job. On the other hand, there are leaders who manipulate a board so that the board is a puppet board and in
Right.
their pocket. And so people think, if I get too close to the board, am I manipulating the board? Am I trying to get yes people around the table? Can you talk about that tension?
that's I will tell you, at least in my experience in the for-profit world, I was never in a situation where there was a puppet board. I mean, it was always a board that they felt their role was, and appropriately, to ask the very tough questions. And but there has to be a balance. A board should ask really tough questions, but they also have to be supportive, because the number one job, I think, it's the toughest job. It was the biggest transition for me, going from number 2 at Saturn to number 1 at Saab, was by far the biggest change and biggest surprise to me, kind of in going into leadership. So
Yeah. So what did that look like? Like, in the good board relationships that you had, did that mean, like, for example, I would always meet our elders outside of board meetings, and we'd go for coffee, we'd go for breakfast, largely because we didn't have a building. We rarely held meetings at the church. We always held them in someone's home. It created a different context. And I think that's something that actually went fairly well in my leadership, because we were able to have tough conversations. They were able to challenge me. There were times where I wanted to quit, and they said, no, hang in there. But there's a friendship, and yet, I don't know, I'm trying to say, I don't think it was yes people for sure.
Right. No.
And if you met them, they would be insulted by that.
Right.
To say, oh, that's what you think. No, but yet there was a camaraderie and a commitment to the mission. So what were some things that you did that produced better relations with the board?
Like you said, I think changing up the locations to a more informal, like having dinner the night before, always break bread with your board. We did that at Hershon, where we broke bread. We actually didn't talk that much about business the night before. It was personal. It was relationship building. But then I would give an overview of what was going to cover tomorrow. I kind of found out what the big issues in their heads were, so we could change or maybe prep a little bit better for the morning. And when I was successful, like at Hershon, I spent a lot more time one-on-one with them, and took them and broke bread, had coffee, flew down to see them maybe one or twice a year. I did none of that, or not enough of that at SeaWorld, because it was just...
Oh, you were under siege,
Yeah,
right?
we were under siege, under attack, and you just lose time. And I just think... that you also need a really, really strong chairman who will help you. The chairman's role is to help bring consensus of the board, because you might have 12 people saying different things. It really shouldn't be the CEO's job to draw consensus. It should be the chairman speaking to the CEO when there's a dog's breakfast of ideas from the board. It really shouldn't be the CEO's job to try to parse all those 12 opinions and go to them individually and get it, because that could take years and cost thousands of lives, right? So those are a couple.
No,
thoughts.
that's good to know. And I always find that it is good. Like even, having meetings in a home or a restaurant, you don't want to discuss confidential stuff in a restaurant, but that's interesting because the classic picture is you're sitting around this table. It feels clinical.
Right.
And I don't know, people behave differently.
They do behave differently. And I think you get more truthful conversations the smaller the group could be. So even
do you have a theory on that? I do.
Definitely.
Yeah. What's your theory?
Well, I think anything over 10, you're not going to get close to the truth.
So an ideal, you're putting a board together.
Oh, ideal, I'd like to have 5 to 6 people.
Bingo, me too.
Yeah.
Or
my senior team. I think senior teams of 5-ish or 6 are the ideal number. But why do you think that?
Well, I want to know about you, and then I'll go.
Because I think you have to have diversity of thought. So you have to have enough for diversity, but everyone has to be able to speak. And it just takes time to get to all the issues. And you can only have a deep, deep relationship, I think, with that many people. Now, Christ did it with 12, so maybe that's the max number. But he still had his inner circle. He still had
his 3.
Peter, John. Yeah, so, but why do you think?
Yeah, no, similar reasons. I just instinctively, I ended up, our churches were really small, but I had 18 elders. So 42 people in worship, adding all 3 churches together, 18 of whom were elders. It was just Disasterville when I started. And so they were appointed for life. And so I started praying for funerals.
Oh, my
sorry, that's sarcastic. But no, then we moved to term service for elders, and I shrunk the board down. And then when we I got it down to about 11 or 12, but it was still unwieldy. And then when we launched Connexus, I started with 3. And then we built it to 5. And I think, and sociologically, I've studied this. You think of a dinner party. If you get more than 6 people at a dinner party, you end up with 2 conversations.
Yeah, always.
You end up you have 5, you can have 1 conversation. You have 6 or 7, you start to move into 2. You have 7 or 8, you've got 2 conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens sociologically with a board as well. And really, if you're trying to create unity in the organization, you need 5 people with strong opinions, different opinions, who are committed to the mission. But you get 5 or 6 in a room. I have the same number you do. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my theory.
Well, good.
What did you learn about yourself when you became a CEO?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. I'll tell you. I'll say I learned some really good things and some really not so good things. I found that I actually, as far as skills, was really good at cutting to the chase quickly and just seeing complex situations and being able to kind of see through it quite quickly. Although every time I go in, I had a good format of I would listen for 90 days and do very little. Here's my strategy. And then we'd come up with a strategy as a team. But once we got it, boy, we would move fast and hard. And I found out I was pretty good at that and kind of cutting through all the chafe, so to speak, and kind of figure out what the key issues were. And I think because my dad was blue collar and we grew up on the lower side of the tracks, I was always good at being able to talk to the chairman, but also the frontline worker. And that differentiated me from a lot of different people. What I found I was really bad at was setting boundaries, and I listened too much to too many different people, and I cared too much about what the external world thought. And in the end of the day, we'll get to this, and this is a big point to make. I believe it cost me my marriage because I listened to too many different voices. I worked too long. I didn't fulfill that commitment in my marriage, and I should have listened always to my internal voice and not the voice of anybody else. And so those were the things that are big learnings for me. Some of them took 20 years to learn. Some of them I knew right away.
Yeah, since you raised it, can we talk about that a little bit, the commitment to overworking and everything? Because as I reread your book, Love Works, right, which you wrote in 2012?
Yep.
Yeah. You're still married.
Yep.
And then that in the SeaWorld years kind of didn't survive.
Right.
What were some of the factors, if you can just explore that a little bit to the degree that you're comfortable, that led? Because I think we all faced that. I mean, I suffered with workaholism. It put pressure on my marriage. That was unhealthy, and I had to learn how to draw boundaries. It's hard.
Yep.
And I was dealing with 1/10 of the pressure that you were under.
Well, at a very macro level, the book Love Works, and we'll get into that. It's a book about leadership under the definition of love the verb that's in the Bible. What in the last word in that book is dedication to the rest of the values. And as I wrote it, as I thought about it, it was completely in the work context. I wasn't writing about it for my personal relationships. In hindsight, that entire dedication chapter should have been in bold, because my own failures as a leader and as a husband were either I wasn't always truthful, and it's not, no one goes in and says, I'm going to lie, but we stretch the truth, or we are afraid. When I say I was externally focused, I was afraid to tell my own wife some of the mistakes I had made because I was afraid of how she would react. Oh, wow. And because I did that, and then she found out the truth not through me, it was, the trust is gone. And if I had just said, I know I was wrong, and I'm going to tell her I was wrong, and we're going to correct the situation, I still think I would probably be married. And the same thing is probably, I know it's true in the business world. If with my SeaWorld board, which was dysfunctional with a lot of different people changing in and out, 100% turnover, I was listening to too many different voices versus just saying, you two are giving me completely different strategies of the last board, and it was, and I can go into that if we have time, but completely different inputs of what we should be doing because they wanted faster traction. I should have said, I know what the internal truthfulness is here. I'm going to stick to what I know is true, what I know is right. If you guys want to fire me, fire me. But so both in my personal life and my professional life, both happening at SeaWorld, I think if I had been completely truthful, then I might even be at both places still. I might still have my marriage, and I might still have my job. I'd much rather have my marriage. I mean, I will tell anybody on this podcast, you will be faced with working too much, not having date nights, whatever the mistake is, right? Everyone is going to be faced with a chance to work too much, to have attraction from other people, to be able to engage in other relationships that are in some way inappropriate. Everyone is going to be faced with that. And it is not listening to any external voice, whether that voice is people's attention feels good or the board's attention feels good. None of that should matter. It is what's right to your own value set. And if that means getting fired, then that's fine. And I know that's hard for a 30 or 35-year-old person to hear that hasn't been a CEO yet or wants to make a lot of, make money or have wealth. I can say at the other end of that, at 60, none of that really does matter. And all the 4 CEO opportunities, that's great. And I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot, and I would love to help other leaders, but nothing compared to kind of not living to the vows or allowing a marriage to unfold and break up is by far worse. So I don't know if that will help anybody, but I almost plead to people to not let the world's demands hurt your relationships with your spouse.
What do you think, looking back on it, kept you from telling the truth to Marky, to the board, from even doing what you kind of knew? It's not like you didn't know, you knew. But what do you think that was?
Have you done any podcasts on the Enneagram?
Oh, yeah, we've done a few.
Okay,
yeah.
so
I'm an 8. What are you?
I'm a 3.
You're a 3? Yeah.
So
yeah.
this the three's mortal sin. And we all have a mortal sin, right? When I'm healthy, I'm an inspirational leader. If I'm unhealthy because I'm too tired or whatever the reason, I can sell so much that it can almost turn to being a deceitful thing it's not a lie as much as it's omission maybe. I am so worried about people's reaction that there's not an internal clock saying it doesn't matter what their reaction is. This is what's right. So in my case with Marky, I shouldn't worry about what she might think. It's like, here's the truth. You have you have to make your own decision. Or to the board, here's the absolute truth. You guys are dysfunctional. You're not helping me. I need you to coalesce around this strategy or approve a different one because we're not making traction fast enough. And if they don't like that, but
you were afraid to put your leadership on the line in those
right,
moments.
because our numbers weren't good, right? So our numbers weren't good. So you feel a little bit not confident enough, even though I'm very confident in my leadership and the numbers were starting to turn. But I hope I articulate right for whether it's personal or professional, whatever set of values you have, that internal clock has to win. That internal compass has to win, not what anybody in the world is thinking. And I actually think it's an epidemic in our society with Facebook, with social media, with Instagram, whatever it is. It's been proven when people get likes, it's almost like an endorphin.
Yeah,
right?
there's a dopamine or whatever that is. Yeah, there's a high.
So, and these kids who are looking at other kids who only show the best part of life, no wonder suicide rates are going up and depression's going up with young children. So I think we have to listen to that internal clock, that internal set of values.
You talked about boundaries and workaholism, and I mean, you've written openly in your book that sometimes you can turn to alcohol or you can turn to other unhealthy vices. Tell us about the boundary struggles that pressure in that top seat brings, because there's there's a lot of second chair leaders listening and others listening, but there's a lot of people who are really ultimately the CEO, the senior leader of the organization listening.
Yeah.
Tell us about those boundaries.
Well, first of all, I will say I haven't always been good at it. Right? So Hershend, I was incredibly 13 years, and I never got to a stress situation where I think I crossed any boundaries. But at SeaWorld, I will say it was 7 days a week. It was probably, for sometimes 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would get calls at all hours of the day from board members and even executives. And especially as I started, my wife and I separated, I did start to drink because I was in pain. But what I learned through counseling, and it helped me so much, and for anybody else who goes through that, the alcohol doesn't help. It actually makes it worse. It's a depressant, and we have to. This is the best quote I got from my counselor: "Do what makes you feel good about yourself, not what makes you feel good." And whether it's drinking or a drug or
eating can be. I think overeating is like
overeating. Whatever the vice is that people feel like they need for the pain, it doesn't help. So tea at night, not a scotch, has helped me get back to where I'm doing things to feel good about myself and not using something to mask some pain because I'm losing my marriage and I knew I was on my way out at Saab.
Looking back,
SeaWorld, sorry.
Yeah, well, and Saab was tough too. I mean, you write about that in Love Works. So, do you think it's possible to have a reasonably balanced life? And I don't even like the word balanced. I don't know why I use that. But, a life with some boundaries where you are actually home one day a week and handle that level of responsibility? Or you think, no, leadership at that level is just, that's a deal with the devil?
I wish I could give you a crisp answer.
I don't think
I would say in a public company, I'm not sure that you can, because between the analysts and the board and the pub and the travel, it is an all-consuming job.
Yeah, and explain for those who are not familiar maybe with publicly traded companies versus privately held, the additional pressure, because Hershend was privately held.
Yeah, Hershend, and there was certainly pressure from the board to perform and grow, but that's all you had to focus on. So you could spend 60, 50, 70 hours a week on improving the business. At SeaWorld, the amount of distractions, I mean, if you don't mind me going there for just a minute.
We should.
We have, first of all, a company that's in turmoil. We had my first 30 days at work, PETA-gate broke, where one of our employees had been spying on PETA. Now, they weren't anymore.
Oh, man.
But I didn't know. I had just gotten there. We had a $2 million legal investigation. We had to fire a bunch of people. I couldn't delegate it because my chief counsel and COO were part of the investigation. So I was the only one that could handle that. Then we got into a Justice Department investigation, and literally the Department of Justice was there almost every week interviewing our employees. SEC investigation for the previous executives possibly misleading the public. We had the protests at our parks, protests at my house by the animal activists. It went on and on and on. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And you have to deal with analysts to talk to them every quarter about how you're doing. You have a board meeting every quarter and probably once a month in between with audit committees. So all that stuff takes you away from running the business. And so to me, my biggest mistake, other than not managing the board at SeaWorld better, was I should have forced delegation of those issues. In some cases, I couldn't because the people I should have delegated to were part of the investigation.
Part of the investigation, yeah.
But
there's the pressure that your share price is going up and down, and I mean, you think of it as an investor, right? If you invest at all, and it's like Apple shares are down 3% because they missed targets by 0.3%.
Yeah,
like it's crazy pressure on the stock price, right?
Our whole system, that's a whole nother conversation we don't have time for, but our whole financial system based on 90-day earnings reports is a very broken system.
Anything else? Any other, like looking back on it, lessons from Hershend was really kind of a big success story. In many ways.
Well, Hershen's, I will say, anybody who knows Jack and Pete Hershend and the family, they're the best owners I've ever seen. And
tell us what they do. The parks you own.
So they're one of the largest private theme park companies in the world. I think they're ninth largest in the world. So we owned at the time a lot of stuff in Branson, Missouri, Silver Dollar City. We are the non-music partner of Dolly Parton. So all of her, theme parks, dinner theaters, she's a wonderful, wonderful lady. We purchased the Harlem Globetrotters. So it's a very diversified
Stone Mountain in Atlanta. Is that yours as well?
Yes. So, but here's the big, if we run out of time here, the big other thing I would love for the listeners to understand is when I talked about those struggling years at General Motors, that was almost 20 years of feeling like there has to be a different way.
Yeah.
It just has to be different than this. It was so autocratic and fear-based and a bunch of cigar smoking, swearing executives that it was really 1960s in the 1980s. It was the Hershends that when I came there, because when Greenlight was sold, I didn't want to go back to the auto industry, so Jack asked me to be the president there. They taught me how to love people, love the verb, not love the emotion, and still create unbelievable results. If you looked at Hershend versus any public or private theme park company, their margins are just as good, their returns are just as good, their turnover is almost non-existent. And it's because of that culture. And what I did there, the only thing I can take credit for is not building the culture, but to put a vernacular to it. And we called it Love Works, and that's what I wrote the book about. And I would encourage anybody who has any of that angst in their soul that leadership should be more caring. And basically, if you care about people, I think it is a book that would be helpful to people to read.
No, I reread it. I read it when it came out, and I reread it getting ready for this interview. It's a great book. It's a challenging book. And the fact that you can't flawlessly execute it all the time doesn't mean it's not a great book.
Well,
and churches are not automatically loving. I mean, churches can have some of the most toxic workplaces out there. It's not just corporate America.
Well, actually, I think the rest of it is, I feel a calling from God, and if God continues to put this on my heart, I actually want to focus the most on helping pastors and churches put Love Works into place, because my point of view, I've spoken at a few, like Rethink Leadership that you organize
you and I have
and run.
done some stuff together.
When I ask people to raise their hand if they have any kind of Love Works or any kind of measurement system of how people behave, nobody raises their hands because they're so focused on loving the congregation. Sometimes the staff and employees aren't focused on enough. And the basic premise is a do goal versus a be goal. And all organizations, nonprofit or profit, have do goals. You've got to hit so many church attendees, or you have to profit attendance. You got to hit the numbers, basically.
Yeah.
Everybody has that. Very few companies actually have processes and systems behind what we call at Hershend and at SeaWorld the be goals. What kind of leader do I want to be? Everybody puts it up on the mantle. Here are our values, and they put it on a billboard or on a poster. That's not what we're talking about here. There's a whole system behind it. There's processes, there's measurements, there's discussions with employees at Hershend and at SeaWorld. Half of people's raises were based on the B goals, not just their do goal results.
So give me an example of a B goal. And you mean BE, right?
Yeah, like I mean the BE. So the do goals, all the numbers. The B goal would be actually, in Love Works, we paraphrase 7 words that represent the definition of love. Those are the B goals. So love is patient. This comes from 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. That's one of the words. Love is kind. Love is forgiving. Love is trusting. Love is truthful. Love is dedicated. And every one of those words had sub-behaviors that we would talk about with our employees. For instance, if you're going to be truthful, have you had a difficult conversation with an employee lately? As an employee, are you willing to be truthful with your boss without fear of retribution? These are specific things we ask, and people are rated on that. And that's how we hopefully get a truthful environment. Does your boss speak last in meetings? Because you're not ever going to get the truth if you speak first, right? You're only going to get so then we would measure it, have a discussion about it, and would go to the raise. So what the book goes into is not just a philosophy, it goes into the actual processes to some degree, at least at a high enough level that people can understand it. And that's the magic of what Hershend did versus just putting it on the wall. It became part of the ethos and very, very reinforced by senior management and the board.
Right. So let's talk about how it worked. So at Hershend, what were some of the practical, tangible expressions, both in your leadership and in the team and the thousands of employees you had in the parks? Like, how did that actually play out where it became a healthier culture and a culture where it was love-based leadership?
Yeah, and that could be a really long answer. The really short answer will be the number one metric we were looking for is engagement of the employee. Unfortunately, in America, when I say top box, out of 4, you're getting a 4, and the worst would be a 1. In America, and this is a 30-year kind of flat trend, 35%, only 35% of Americans are top box engaged in their work. Now, it's gone up slightly the last 3 years because of the hot economy and people aren't trading jobs. At Hershend, we would buy parks, and I can tell you, like right here at Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia, when we came in, the top box engagement score was 17%.
So these are people who are phoning it in.
These are people,
they don't care.
They probably have
I got a crappy
2
job.
side jobs.
I hate it.
Moonlighting. They're working 2 or 3 jobs.
Give me my $13 an hour and I'm out of here. Right?
Well, I wish
or
it was
whatever.
13.
Whatever.
It is now, but it wasn't then. And then within 3 years, it had gotten to 65%. And when I left, it was at 80% top box. And that's world class.
What do you mean by top box?
Meaning just that 80% of the employees said they were fully engaged in their work. Out of one out of a four, they were a four, meaning we are completely engaged. We love our job. And turnover went down. And then of course, profitability goes up. It happens to be what's good for the business too.
So how do you do that? I mean, let's go into a little more detail. Like I'm a gate attendant. All I do is see whether you're tall enough to take the ride. I'm making minimum wage, which was, forgive me, I'm Canadian. What would it have been roughly?
At that time, it would have been $7.50.
So $7.50 an hour.
Yep.
You know, I'm barely paying my gas to get here.
Yep.
I hate my job. It's hot. If I got a better job, I'm gone tomorrow. Yep. So how do you motivate me?
So there are a lot of factors. I wish I could give you a silver bullet, but
but you did some things. I mean, moving from 17 to 80.
So the first thing is to put a measurement in place, and that's just asking the employees at least once a year. Now, we actually did it every quarter if it was a bad performing property. Ask them how they feel. Ask them, and we had the 6 key things that the Gallup organization, which they're the ones that measure this engagement score nationwide. What are the 6 things that take engagement up? And I don't have time to go into those, but there's 6 key questions. And we would track that by supervisor, by employee. We knew everywhere in the company where the problems were, and it's always leadership. It's always leadership. And then we would do something about it when the scores were bad. And then every 90 days, we'd go back in with SurveyMonkey and make sure the scores were improving. If they weren't, the leader was gone. And one big fallacy about Love Works is there's a high commitment to performance, and you just got to have an honest conversation.
So it's not just love them or whatever. No. It's all okay.
No.
But okay, so how? But
so then we measure them. Then they also they were able to, in that 6 questions, they're basically also kind of grading their boss, so to speak. They would get raises and bonuses based on how they were doing with the Love Works and when they got reviewed. Then we also started a foundation, and I know every company can't do this, but when I was on Undercover Boss, that was a big thing that we were pushing.
Is that still out there?
I don't think the show's still on.
No, it's not on. But I wonder if that lives in YouTube or something.
Oh yeah,
because we'll link to the episode.
It's out on.
You were one
Netflix,
of the first ones on
the first season. Yeah,
first season of Undercover Boss.
Episode 6 of first season. But it portrays that. It portrays that foundation where this is an interesting concept. Nothing happens unless the employee gives $1. Then we would match it as the company, and actually the owners, the Hershens, matched it. So 1 became 3, and all that money was used to help the employees in need. And so it started this spiral up. That this was before Obamacare, so a lot of them, like part-timers, didn't have benefits, but we used this pool of money to help them when they were in trouble. And what happens is, where else would they go to where there's a foundation to help them? They're getting bonuses they aren't getting at other properties. And we try to be competitive with wages, at least median to everybody else. So it takes 3 years though. It's not a silver bullet, and all of a sudden it starts to spiral up.
How do you get me? And I hear that, and that's highly motivating. How do you get me to care about the guest? How do you get me to say, wow, this is actually another human being I'm interacting with, not like, hey, I've only got 45 minutes till my break.
Because that's how they're graded. Like when we had a simple 1-page,
so you measure
a seasonal person, you can get guest scores at least down to kind of department areas, not to a person usually, but they got more. They were paid more, they got bonuses, or they were retained because they were good with the customer. And we celebrated the heck out of it. I mean, if you helped the customer in an abnormal way, we would have monthly celebrations. I would fly in for the big annual celebration. We just made a very, very big deal about guest experience.
Oh, that's great. And what you, as Andy says, our mutual friend, Andy Stanley, what you celebrate gets repeated.
Yes. And we celebrated that like crazy.
Okay, so let's take those principles to SeaWorld. And again, you got really high employee engagement, increased, great board. You're in a reasonably good place personally when you're at Hershend. right? Those principles are working for you in your own life?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
All right.
Definitely fair.
Then you go to SeaWorld and you try to apply the same things. It's less than 3 years, so we don't really have the turnaround window. But talk about how the Love Works principles worked and then maybe how they didn't work as well when you were at SeaWorld.
Yeah, that's an obvious question in a way because a public company, a lot of people think it can't happen in a public company.
Yeah.
I actually fully believe it can. There are many examples where it has. I know you've probably talked to Cheryl Batchelor when
she's been on here. And you're on the board at Popeyes, right?
Yep. Now we've sold that company now, but so that the board doesn't exist anymore. But she did a phenomenal job in a public company. Every metric at SeaWorld that is about the employee engagement improved every year we were there. With the exception of one property, and that went down 1 year and then it came back up again. But for the whole corporation went up. The issue at the front line, all of the processes were working. What wasn't working really was support from the board, because they wanted. It's not that they didn't support it. It was they wanted the numbers and quickly. And although I went in saying it would take at least 3, maybe 5 years, I was not even there 3 years. I do think there was an underestimation of how long it would take, but it wasn't a big part of what they wanted because, and I think this is not, I'm not blaming, this is not about the board. They were doing their fiduciary responsibility.
It's a values clash.
And it's also the way the markets are set up, right? Yeah. The public markets don't reward a company helping in other ways. And I think that's a problem. That's a whole different conversation, is that I believe stakeholders are not just the shareholders. If you're looking at only the shareholder, all you're doing is maximizing profit in the short term. I frankly feel any fool can go in and do the wrong thing and increase profit really quickly. You cut costs, you take out quality, you don't pay people enough, and for 2 or 3 years, you'll get by, but people will start to leave. The customer won't come back because the quality is worse. We've seen it in every industry. That's where I think the 90-day horizon, the public market's just not set up properly to do the right thing for the long term. That was more of the conflict at SeaWorld than, it wasn't that the board didn't want to treat employees well. It was that, hey, you got to get the numbers up now, not 2 years from now. And that's more of a public market issue.
But you did see some aspects, if I read my notes right, that of employee engagement and satisfaction went up while you were there at SeaWorld.
And not only our guest scores went up, but changing our employee brand to being a purpose-driven brand. The millennials loved being part of SeaWorld. They could take 1 day a year, do turtle walks. They could do trash pickups. They were part of a company that was all about helping ocean marine animals. And once they understood that, they loved working for the company. And we were able to compete with a Disney or Universal that paid a lot more per hour because they were working for a cause. And that's a good thing.
So I want to, because we've had a great conversation. I really appreciate your honesty. Thank you. I think these kinds of conversations are so helpful. I think some people would be too afraid to see themselves in the mirror, but I think back to myself at different points, and I needed conversations like these, and they're hard to find. So thank you, Joel.
I think you're welcome. I think it's important that leaders know that it is lonely. It can be hard at times. You can go. I know you've gone through a really tough time and came out better because of it. I'm doing the same thing. I think everybody goes through that in life. It's important that they know that. Yeah, everyone goes through it.
So we've talked about the rhythms and disciplines and habits that maybe weren't very functional and didn't serve you or your family or ultimately God particularly well. But you've had about 18 months now since you exited SeaWorld, and we're here in your home. You've got some new habits, and you took me upstairs and you showed me a really cool space that you've kind of designed for yourself. Tell me about that.
Well, I'm the greatest thing about not being a public company CEO is having more time. And so I love music. And so I'm playing a lot more music, piano. My brothers and I are in a band called the Berlin Airlift, and we get together once a year for reunions. ever since my parents died, and love doing that. And I love spending every morning not every morning, but every morning where I'm not like on an airplane, kind of half an hour, just reading the Bible, praying, reflecting, writing down my mistakes from yesterday, a reflective life. And every time I've gotten in trouble, whether it's medicating, whether it's just doing the wrong thing, I can always tie it back to I wasn't having my quiet time, my prayer time, and I started forgetting that the only audience I should be pleasing is God. It's very simple formula. Yeah. It's just harder the heck to do. And sometimes our actions are like, we almost are acting like God's not there. So do we really believe he's there when we're acting like he's not? So when I'm in his word every day and praying and communicating, I don't forget during the day that he's there. And I know that's kind of 101 stuff, but I can definitely point to getting away from that. So that's a really good rhythm.
So did you have that rhythm in seasons when you were in corporate?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And then things went better at home, things went better at work.
I can directly link it to a lack of my own spiritual health, quiet times, whether it's hanging with my friends, my accountability group, my church. It really does make a difference. Yeah. And I think that's why I'm saying this, and I'm willing to be vulnerable, because I think one of the greatest failings of senior leaders, and pastors are right at the top of the list, is getting isolated and feeling like they can't share what they're going through. And it will go badly if they don't share, if they don't have a cohort to talk to, if they don't find other leaders. And it usually can't be your board, because no one wants to go to their board and say, I'm really struggling. Or
that's right. Well, you're done Friday. Clean out your desk.
Yeah, I don't want to hear your problems. Just solve our problems. Yeah. So that's probably the healthiest.
So how did you cultivate that? I mean, now it's a little bit easier. You're back in Atlanta. You've got some time. You can play music in the morning. And you got a picture of your small group, here in your living room. But when you were successful cultivating community, when you were in corporate, how did you do it?
It's just priority. I mean, the truth is.
What was it like? Was it small group? Was it?
It was. I have an accountability group for 35 years. Well, actually, no, ever since Harvard. So however long that's been, about 40 years. We talk every month by phone, and we've never missed a phone call until recently. And there's reasons for that. But I would recommend that to anybody. And then, I have someone local too. But this group, we've known each other for all these years, and we share everything. And they've held me accountable. When I've made mistakes, we've ostracized each other. It's just like, when you get your act together, you can come back on these calls. And so it's a very good, strict group.
So at the bottom, they were calling you out and you were telling them the truth?
Yeah, well, not soon enough. I eventually did, but I wasn't truthful.
Guys, there's some stuff I've been hiding.
Yeah. Don't do that. And they would have loved me either way. They would have, but I wasn't truthful immediately. And man, it doesn't get any better. It only gets worse. So those are, when you ask about rhythms, I'd have to say it's the accountability group. It's the quiet time in the morning. And, I wish I had never left those things, but I just want to encourage people. You'll go through down times, but you can always make your way back up. You can't do everything, but you can do the important things. And that's...
So when you look at, because this is a sojourn in your life, you want to continue to do some other things as you look ahead, whether that's in corporate or not-for-profit world, or working with churches, or writing other books and that kind of stuff. What rhythms are there some rhythms that you think, okay, these are now non-negotiable? So I'm going to assume Scripture, that quiet time in the morning, accountability. Any other rhythms, disciplines, or strategies that you're going forward?
That's a great question, Carey. But where I am right now, I said it before, but not very articulately. it's the internal clock. It's the internal values. It's like when something happens in my intuition or my gut, or something I say, or I'm lack of forgiveness, or I'm angry at somebody, I have to deal with it and not worry about what that person thinks. Just say, I'm upset at this. This is what happened. Why? Or I did this wrong. You need to know, or whatever it is. That's the rhythm that, if you or any listener wants to pray for me, it is to listen to that internal clock, and as a 3 on the Enneagram, not listen to the external voices that I'm trying to please for God knows why. Because they're not my God, and they're not my family. And for some reason, I have tried to please too many voices. So that's the new rhythm that I am very excited about. Whatever years God gives me left, I'm not going to mess that up.
Wow. Well, this is what they don't teach you at Harvard. Fair enough.
I was going to write a book. Actually, remember the book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard, that guy wrote? Yeah. I was going to teach what they do teach and what's wrong with it. I thought that was, but it's too late to write the book.
Joel, you've been so transparent. It's so helpful. I would highly recommend your book, Love Works. It does stand, and now you've got nuance and context, despite the struggles of the last few years that I think we're all being tested all the time, and the struggles of yesterday will not be the struggles of tomorrow. Well, but it's a joy to sit here with you. You helped a lot of leaders, as vulnerable, open as you were, as painful, I'm sure, as talking about some of this stuff was. It's getting conversations out there. That was sort of the heartbeat of my idea behind this podcast, because you're not alone. And everybody looks at everyone else and says, well, they don't have any problems. And the reality is we all do. And if we can share them, we can help each other. Yep. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job at it.
Well, thanks. Where can people find you online if they want to?
I think Instagram would be the best way to, and I post there, and I will start doing more.
So we will link to that.
All right. Okay, great.
Joel, thank you.
Thanks, Carey. Appreciate it.
Guys, thanks so much for listening. We love bringing you bonus episodes like this from time to time, and I'm sure we'll do that again. In the meantime, have a great day, and we'll see you next Sunday at Connexus Church, Barrie, Midland, Orillia, and of course online anytime at connexuschurch.com.